Welcome to the Sonic Shaman Show, home of the Coffee Connect and Conscious Connections. The show is dedicated to empowering you to perceive, know, be, and express your unique voice in this world without the fear of judgment of others through healing, coaching, and educational services. In each episode, Hank and his guests offer tools, techniques, and inspiration to help you step into your potency. Now, here is your host, Hank Setala.
Hello, everyone. I'm so excited for today's guest, Sifu Love, who just has an entire umbrella of knowledge and wisdom for us. But today's topic is all about imagination. But I'll let you go ahead and just give us the 30-second or 1-minute elevator speech, just letting us know what you're all about.
Sure. So hello, everyone. My name is Sifu Love, and I teach people how to heal themselves through different spiritual modalities so that they can ultimately live the life of their dreams. I've been doing martial arts for many, many years, and now I'm coming out of the secret closet to share the practices to help other people.
Yeah, and what I really love when we talked a little bit around our original kind of like get to know each other call, you have such a wide array of teachers, and you've been able to take things from all these different places and blend them together. And that's what I do on the shamanism side. And so just to meet somebody that's doing the same thing from a different tradition, it feels like we have so much that we can contribute and learn from each other.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think so. And I think it's all about the way we are creative and the way we use our imagination to bring together the different parts into something that feels honest and powerful for us and other people can resonate with. Yeah.
And that's today's topic really is imagination. And even my teacher, Zane Curfman, he says that imagination is one of the most powerful tools to manifest and actualize the world that you're creating. But specifically, he always says disciplined imagination, because sometimes unchecked, the imagination could be a foe as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's definitely true. I would say unchecked imagination, you sort of either ruminate or you kind of go off into different streams. And so having a disciplined imagination allows you to pull all these different thoughts together and create something.
Yeah, and I'm sure with the martial arts, you have that real discipline in the thoughts. But for someone just starting, that maybe they're not able to see you directly or whatever the case is, like how does someone start to refine their imagination so that it can be used with intention for the things that people truly wish to manifest in their lives and get away from the unexpected unconscious creations that everybody's doing that actually, but how do we minimize that and start to step into really using the imagination as a tool?
It's a really good question. There's two ways to look at it. I see one is you go into the imagination, and one you're bringing the imagination into reality. So going into the imagination means something like journaling, for example. So you write down a question and then you just allow whatever thoughts to come up. And so when you do that, you've sort of structured your imagination to be centered around a focal thought. And so it's kind of like existing within this particular cloud, and there's that containment there. There's the other end of bringing the imagination into the sort of three-dimensional world. And that is more so just sitting there and just allowing all the imagination thoughts to come up. And then again, with the modality of journaling. So you have all these thoughts that come up and you just journal them down in words and bullet points and pictures or whatever, and then use the critical thinking discernment mind to find a connection between them. So it's all about using, so that is a specific example using journaling, but using a modality to either contain the imagination or to make sense of the expansiveness of the imagination.
I love that, because imagination, when it starts going off on the tangents, like the different rabbit holes, think Alice in Wonderland, how crazy it is with all the different things happening, being able to find the consistency. And that's where a lot of people misfire when they're looking to create their life, because every 10 seconds, they're picking something different instead of seeing the theme and how do these things weave together. My teacher uses the phrase dream weaving as part of the imagination process, especially like you and I, when we were talking, we were kind of dream weaving what we were going to talk about. We're dream weaving other collaborations that we might be able to do. And so how does someone start to dream weave or use their imagination with others? Because there's a saying in Access Consciousness, I think I shared it with our Get to Know Each Other call, just for me, just for fun, never tell anyone, because sometimes you have this inspiration, but when you share it with someone, it might take away from the energy instead of add it to the energy. Any thoughts on how to bring people in that can add potency to what you want to create?
Yeah. I think There's something around the idea of intimacy and the way in which you connect with another person. If you're sharing your imagination with another person, you want to make sure that the person is holding whatever you're sharing to a certain degree of respect, and they're, I would say, actively listening. And I say that because I've been in conversations with people where we have these like lovely exchanges, and I feel like, oh yeah, my imagination is coming forth, yours is coming forth, they're intermingling. And then I didn't feel like they honored the exchange. And like for some people, what they do is they took a conversation and then they posted it online, or they kind of talked about some of the nuances of our conversation. And so that took away the intimacy of the sharing that we had within the moment. The imagination is, I often describe it as like a sensitive child. And it's something where you can share it with other people, but if it's not honored, or if it's exposed, it gets frightened. And actually, I would say it's more so the soul gets frightened. And then the imagination is less likely to present itself. So there's a sort of, again, a containment of intimacy that you can have with another person while you're exchanging your imagination. And that helps to protect the privacy, the sacredness of whatever's coming up within that exchange. The issue is we live in a culture where people want to share everything. You want to broadcast everything out to the world. And, you know, it's beautiful to broadcast, and because there's beautiful platforms like this, but there's some things that you want to hold to yourself or between you and another person and not have that shared. And that adds intimacy. It adds a level of specialness to that interaction. And then the imagination sees that, and the imagination then feels more confident to come up and feed more images or thoughts or whatever it might be. So that's why I describe the imagination as sort of like a sensitive child.
Ooh, sensitive child. So it's something that you're nurturing. It makes sense. It's like the little seed of inspiration that you have to cultivate, you have to germinate, and you take care of to allow it to grow. But if you bring in the wrong person in and they're not adding the right type of fertilizer, you know, then then it can't flourish. I love that. That's a wonderful analogy to kind of explain that. Now, I know you have like a decade of experience teaching people spiritual martial arts. When it comes to that, how does the body, because like the imagination feels like a mental thing and a spiritual thing, does the body have a role in the imagination?
It does. It does. So one of the things that I teach people sort of very early on in the beginning is that the body is always giving off some sort of signal. So whether it be from how you feel comfortable sitting or how you feel comfortable moving your hands as you're talking or, you know, doing anything, the body is somehow interacting within whatever you're doing. So the more that you can sort of watch the body or sense how the body is expressing itself, you kind of get a little bit of those deeper messages. And the imagination is feeding the body through actions, through positions, and through behavior. So that's one of the things that I tell people, is to start to notice how your body wants to move in certain situations, and then start to draw some sense of, draw some correlations to that. You know, the other thing is around, you know, the imagination is, it feels like very much of a mental process. And then when you add that mental process into the body, you notice how the body starts to shift. So, and, you know, I see this a lot when I teach Qigong. Qigong is a movement meditation practice that incorporates the imagination. Well, the style in which I teach incorporates the imagination. And so, like, for example, in Qigong, instead of me saying to like let your hand like drop down to the side, so people like bring their hands up and their hands go down. That's a very like simple movement that we do all the time. The hands rise and go down. But then when I say to imagine that your hand is like the tide of a wave, and as your hand goes up and down, it's flowing with the wave itself. And then the hand starts to move a little bit differently. There's a consciousness that comes up as the imagination is connecting to the body movement. And then as the body movement starts to shift, it's no longer this, which feels like whatever, but now it's more of a flowy motion. And that fluid motion then connects to the emotional body and the mental body. And then you get a sense of feedback once you have the sensitivity. So there's different ways to see the imagination within the body. You can always bring it in from the mental space into the body, or you can just notice how the body wants to move, how it naturally moves, and draw a correlation to your own imagination from that.
Yeah. And for that matter, people who have a hard time connecting with their imagination, there's a concept in NLP that says you match somebody's physiology, you recreate their experience. So if people have trouble connecting, like the meditation posture or the thinking man pose, or like what physiology could you mimic in your body to allow the inspirations to flow more freely?
Exactly, exactly. And in the system that I teach, it's based off of one of my teachers who has just like changed my entire world. There are these specific stances that we hold, and the stances are creating what she calls sacred architecture, in which the body then knows how to bring in energy, bring in certain ideas and concepts. And those particular stances are really powerful. I tend to start my classes with a couple of those stances, and there's a stance related to innocence. Yeah, to innocence. There's stances that are related to power, stances that are related to vulnerability. So when you stand in those stances, you're bringing in the energy or the possibility of those things, and then you see how comfortable you are with that, or how difficult it is for you, and then that becomes another sense of feedback and inspiration for you to understand what's going on with the body.
Yeah. And for that matter, I'm all about the question and access consciousness. You could even ask body, what position or what could I do with the body to allow all these energies to flow more easily, and for the body and the being to be in communion with one another. There's this idea that the body is something you have. The body is like a separate thing in a sense, and to be able to work with it in communion with it, it's a whole nother ballgame. But so many people have the idea that they're working against their bodies, or their body isn't is betraying them with things coming up for them. Do you have any tricks on how to bring the body and the being more into communion? I'm sure a lot of the practices that you have, but for beginners, like, is there something they can do to really start to bring in that harmony and the communion between the totality of them?
Yeah. You're definitely, your intuition is definitely on it, and that my practices work to align the mind, body, and the soul. Because when there's that alignment, especially if you're trying to manifest, now everyone's focused on manifestation. So that's a large part of my teachings is whenever you're trying to manifest, you really want to have that mind, body, soul alignment, so then you can move forward in a way that's most authentic and is going to be potent and is going to actually create your own manifestations. So I would say one very simple practice is, you can go online and find a list of different emotions, right? And I like doing emotions because people either really struggle with emotions and they don't know how to articulate their emotions, or they haven't really had the opportunity or the invitation to really think about what the emotions are, and how they experience them. So the easy thing that I tell people to do is to go online, find one of those lists of emotions. And then say you pick the emotion fear, for example, which is a very common one. And then what you can do is you can ask your body, so what does fear look like? And the body might go into something like this, where it's like kind of recluse or kind of coming into itself. And just sort of allow the body to take whatever form it wants to take as you're thinking about this concept of fear. And then you can think, using the imagination or using your memory more so, when was a time that I felt fearful? And then when you ask that question, see how your body reacts. Does your body go into that same position? Does your body change position? And then you can start to utilize your imagination and say, okay, well, when I'm out in nature, like what looks fearful? Like what looks like it has fear? Maybe there's a tree that you saw that for some reason, the way that it's standing or the way that it's standing, it looks like fear, for example, for you. So then you see the tree in that way, and then maybe you mimic that posture, and the posture is something like this. And then you're like, well, does this feel like fear to me? So, that's one way that I help people develop more vocabulary and capacity for emotions, because I think emotions are super important. So just taking a simple emotion and try to see it out in nature, utilizing the imagination, bring it into the body and see what shapes the body makes, and then utilize your memory to see how your memory will impact the body. And all of that is just a way for you to practice connecting these different things. And the thing is, the more you practice, the easier it becomes. And when you first practice, you're going to fumble. You'll be like, I don't know what fear looks like in nature. Trees don't look fearful. You start off, many people start off like not knowing how to do it, but the more you practice it, you spend 5 minutes, just 5 minutes a day, just practicing it. Then in like a week or so, you become like a lot more comfortable with it. And then you go out into the world and you see the way a squirrel climbs up a tree, and you're like, oh, that seems like agitation for some reason, and then you start to get these emotions, and then your body reacts to just that sensory emotion. And so it's really just like a constant practice, and martial arts is all about discipline and practice, and that's why I teach from a martial arts perspective.
Absolutely. And just a reminder for everyone, if you have questions, if you have comments, if you want us to speak to something going on in your life, go ahead and make a comment. We'd love to be interactive with you. And now just taking a step back with how you got started in all this, I'm sure as a child, all of us have, well, we want to be such and such when we grow up. We want to be such and such when we grow up. How did you go from childhood to coming into being in the practice that you are and making the choice to actually start helping people? How did your imagination guide you to where you got today?
It's a really good question, and I'd love talking about this. So when I was a child, I wanted to be a spy. I wanted to go around and use fighting techniques, and really the whole purpose of me being a spy was to prevent disasters from happening so that more people's lives could be saved. And, for me, that felt like a really fun, career choice. And then when I got older, I realized what it meant to be a spy and the difficulty, and the CIA never contacted me. So I was like, okay, well, this isn't going to happen. And then I started cooking, and cooking became a way for me to mix together different ingredients to create a product that I would then share with people. And I would see the joy come over them as they were enjoying my culinary creations. So I enjoyed cooking and sort of putting things together and seeing how that was helping people. I felt like it was changing their lives, because there were a lot of people that I was cooking for. I would sense whatever emotions that they were experiencing, and I would cook something to kind of help remedy that or to help them move through that. And, because I'm clairvoyant, clairaudient, mainly when I was a child, I could really sense how people were being shifted as they were eating the food that I was creating. So then, this kind of turned into me wanting to go back to being a spy. And I'm like, well, I really want to be a spy. And then I watched some movies about samurais, and I was like, ooh, this is like a spy, but with this sort of martial artsy edge to it. And that led me into trying out Kung Fu for the very first time. Just to be clear, samurai culture is Japanese, Kung Fu is Chinese. So I ended up doing Kung Fu because I saw some movies that had this sort of magical quality of Kung Fu. And I've always been into magic, and I've been practicing magic for a while. So then I started to do Kung Fu, and I just loved it, and I fell in love with it. And it sort of clicked in all of the different ways. It gave me the whole spy mentality. It gave me the whole creation process that I got through cooking. And that's sort of how I ended up being a martial artist. And I've been training for about, started when I was 13, so I've been training for 16 years now. So it's been a while, and I've been competing around the world in competitions. Actually, I did the Gay Olympics a couple years ago, and that within itself was a major moment. It was a beautiful experience, because in that moment, I felt like I had become another level of a martial artist. I became a performer plus martial artist in that particular event. So that's how I came to be the martial artist that I am today.
Yeah, and I think magic might be a whole separate stream, because at first I was going to dive into that, but then I'm hearing to ask the question about the difference or the similarities between inspiration and imagination, and how those two work in tandem.
Good question. And yeah, I feel like magic is a whole
that's another
hours and hours of conversation.
I was excited, well, we could dive down that. I'm like, oh no, that's another stream. But let's dive into inspiration and imagination, and how to weave the two together, that use them, how they're different and how they're the same. Or well, they're not the same, but you get what I'm saying.
Yeah. I find that inspiration often comes from I find that inspiration is something that comes from within, and it's usually based off of something. So it's connected to something that you've already experienced within your life. And the imagination isn't necessarily that. Sometimes it is, but for the most part, the imagination seems like it's completely new or it's completely foreign. Whereas inspiration is usually connected to something that's happened in the past. So I would say it's a very fine line, but I find that the imagination is more encompassing, whereas the inspiration is something that is coming up and it's guiding you toward an action, toward doing something, whereas the imagination is just sort of this like nebulous existence that's not asking anything of you except for you to pay attention to it.
Yeah, and the analogy that they're giving me is kind of coming back to our garden analogy. The inspiration is the seed, the imagination is that seed coming into being and really starting to offer its flower to the universe.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's a beautiful way to put it. I love that. That's beautiful.
Yeah. Yeah. And a reminder, guys, this is a quiet group today, though. I just want to remind you, if you have a question, if you have an inspiration, please make a comment. We love to dive down any place where you'd like us to go. So what comes up to you now? Because I'm feeling that maybe we're shifting a little bit from imagination, that might feel a little bit complete. Where else would you like to go with our conversation? What else is on your heart that you'd love for people to have more awareness around?
Yeah. There's something around, I guess I mentioned the Olympics, and for some reason I want to talk about performance and maybe the way imagination, at least for me, comes up in performance. So performance is something that I really enjoy doing. And for me, performance is a major spiritual practice. And it's a spiritual practice because when I go in to perform, I'm not doing it through my own ego. I'm doing it through the compilation of, let's say, my imagination. I've been inspired to put on some sort of performance, and my imagination is coming in and it's feeding the performance to become whatever it's meant to become. When I was at the Gay Olympics, I did a performance. It was a spiritual martial arts performance. And prior to that, I kept getting this inspiration related to the Black Panther, because I had all these downloads from my ancestors around like sort of the Black Panther consciousness and like what it meant to be a Black person in the United States. And so I had this sort of inspiration bubbling up within me. And then I kept getting all of these images feeding from my imagination. I kept getting information from my guides and my ancestors. And then that led me into creating this spiritual martial arts performance for the Black Panther. And so interesting. I remember when I knew I was going to do the performance, I asked my mom to create me a costume, because she sews beautifully. She actually sewed this that I'm wearing right now. And so she created this Black Panther like outfit for me. I got someone else to curate the music, and then I put the performance together, and it ended up being a very transcendent moment, because the performance itself wasn't me trying to win at the Olympics. It wasn't my ego saying I have to do all these things. I have to do all of these flips and jumps and all of that to win. Granted, I ended up doing that because that's what my body wanted to do. My body wanted to jump and flip. But the performance itself, there was one moment when I was extremely tired, because there was my third part of the day. I had rolled my ankle 2 times already. And so I was really tired. And halfway throughout the performance, just in a moment that I was supposed to go into a jump, flip, kick, I got really tired, and I felt my ancestors like put their hands on me and sort of push me through the form. And that moment was super transcendent for me, because I felt my ancestors push me through the performance. And that was really powerful and potent for me. And the only reason that happened was because I allowed my imagination to feed into what the performance was going to be, instead of having my ego say, this is exactly what's going to happen. And so there's this power that I believe with the imagination. I guess it's going back to the imagination.
Yes.
But there's this power that comes with the imagination, that when you utilize the imagination, it gives access to other beings of light, other guides, to kind of feed you information. And I find a lot of the times in our society, we're so devoid from the imagination, which is also correlated to us being devoid from these otherworldly beings that are trying to help us or guide us or assist us. So the closer we are related to our imagination, the more likely we are to have these transcendent experiences in this particular 3-dimensional reality.
Yeah, and I'm getting the idea. I have to give credit because Spirit's giving me this. That it's almost as though you have the inspiration, and now you're acting it into being. Like your performance, your choices in the world are what bring it to actualization. But the real key point that you touched on is you're not doing it for someone else, because otherwise you're like trying to feed into who they're projecting that you should be versus who you actually came to be. So that inspiration flowing into your actions as an actor and performance to do it for you, but having that be a nectar for other people to then find their unique voice, to be able to focus on their inspiration, their imagination, their actions, and their performance in this world.
Yeah, and I think that's a beautiful way to put it, because I've found for myself, the more authentic I am, the more it gives other people to be, the more permission it gives other people to be authentic for themselves. And it's, I want to say authenticity is an energy that's palpable. People can feel it. Like I can feel when I'm walking down the street and I see someone who is so into their own authentic self, I feel it, and it makes me want to be similar. Not want to be just like them, but it makes me want to be into my own authentic, unique self. I think that's so important for us to try to work toward authenticity, because our society, our culture is structured in a way to pull us away from our authentic self. Our culture tries to keep us manipulatable. Is that a word? Yes, manipulatable. It sounds really strange, but our culture tries to keep us sort of in this way that we can then be manipulated and fed ideas. That's why advertisements and things like that work, is because advertisements try to say that we are the same kind of person, and then we're going to feed you this information and we're going to make you want this sort of thing. And so the more authentic you are, the more strength you have to fight against all of these outside forces that are trying to tell you who you are. And rather, you know how to go inward, and you know how to like feel full from your own energy versus trying to like absorb the energy from the outer world, which doesn't really know who you are on the inside.
And that kind of leads us into another element of this discussion. We've talked about imagination all throughout childhood, and with society, churches, family, and all that. They end up putting layer on layer of the stuff that we have to end up pushing through. Like we call it hucha in shamanism, this heaviness, like the projections and the teaching of who we're not. In order and even in astrology, they say your first 28 years, your first Saturn return is you being programmed. Your next 28 years is you unprogramming yourself. And the next 28 years is you actually stepping into you. All that can be fast tracked. That's the autopilot if you're not conscious. So what do people do to really start peeling out and getting rid of all that stuff that's sitting on top of that seed to bring it ease and flower? Because everyone's going to flower eventually, but how much more ease could there be if there wasn't 10 feet of soil to go through, you know?
Yeah. And that's why I just have to say, I really enjoy the practices that I've been able to cultivate and create and share, is because the answer, I think, exists in the body. And we need to really see how our body's responding to certain stimuli. Because there are beautiful things that are out there in culture that are for us, and there are things that are not out there that are for us. And the more in touch we are with our body, the more sensitive we become, the more that we're able to feel like, okay, I'm seeing this image of heels, for example, like 6-inch stilettos. I'm seeing this image. And when I see this image, what does it do to my body? Like my body gets really excited. I also felt this kind of excitement when I got the Adele concert tickets when I was like 14 years old, and I cried out of excitement. And so I created that correlation, and then now I'm like, okay, this is an image that's coming to me. Maybe I'll try this out. And this is a story from my own life. And now I actually really enjoy wearing heels. Heels is one of the ways that I feel really powerful in my own being, and it accentuates my calves, and I love my calf muscles, and it makes me feel tall, and I love feeling tall. So, heels is something that I saw all over culture, and I was able to feel in my body the response to it. And then I was able to adapt it into my own being, and now it's become a part of my life and the way that I go out and enjoy myself. So I would say the answer is to go back into the body and see how the body is responding to different situations. And even that bodily response, there's conditioning there that we have to sort of peel back. And that's why practices come so handy because practices help us develop the sensitivity within the body. And the more sensitivity you have to your own body, the more you're able to sense what around you is actually feeding your authenticity versus what's pulling you away. So yeah, that's what I would say.
Yeah. And to that point, I would encourage everybody, be the invitation to open up the dialogue with your body. Because when I started paying attention to like, hey body, what would be a contribution to you on my spiritual journey? My diet changed overnight. The clothing that I chose changed virtually overnight when I really started tuning in. And like, it's almost like it's two strangers that have been living together for years that never have talked to each other before, and starting to open up that dialogue. It's a whole new world when you can actually work in totality, because the body is just a vehicle for you to do the performance and do the actions, but the body's also storing cellular memory from all these energetic imprints from family, friends, society, and all that. And to weave through that and eliminate it really opens up the communication. And then what else is possible when you really are being you and all of you, body being unbound.
Yeah, and I think that's a beautiful way to put it. One of the things that I do as like a regular practice that one of my teachers taught me is to have a dialogue with my soul itself. So I sort of imagine my soul and I'm like, okay, what is it that you were trying to express today? Or sometimes I ask myself, in what way can I be a little bit more like you today? And then when I say that to my soul, there's always some answer that comes forth. Like, oh, drink more water, or try wearing this, or have this conversation, or do this sort of thing. And then I do it. And and I'm not going to say maybe, like 99% of the time, I feel like it brings me closer to my own authentic self. So just having that dialogue with the body, with the soul is extremely helpful because it gives you some sort of action, some sort of idea for then you to go out and enact and see how that feels. But again, we also need to have that sensitivity to feel whether or not these ideas are something that we want to keep or something that we're just meant to try on like once or twice.
Yeah, and one of my favorite questions in the morning is what energy, space, consciousness, and choice can my body, being and beyond be to actualize more of me and my authentic self today than any day before with total ease? I know that's a little wordy, but it's like recognizing the totality of you. And it's like, well, what would it take for me just to be a little bit more or a lot more than of me today than any day prior to that? And if you can keep that energy, that momentum going, you're going to have this upward spiral possibility. And then the imagination is key, because after you ask that question throughout your day, your imagination is going to bring you things. You're going to notice things, and you're going to know that it matches the question if you're allowing and paying attention to your imagination. And then you follow that energy, like, hey, maybe I should be wearing this yellow shirt, which is going to get me noticed by so-and-so, or whatever the case is. Maybe I should be eating this because my body needs this in order to detox that. Like, whatever it is, having the openness and willingness to be present with the imagination and not getting rid of it because we were taught as kids, it's time to grow up. And everything that brings up, let's destroy it and create it.
Yeah. I actually really like that question. It's very specific, and you're right. It is wordy, but I think that the extra words adds a level of specificity, which is helpful because again, the imagination is wide and it can take so many different forms. So to use words to contain the imagination is actually a way to kind of get a little bit more clarity instead of like having something that's really like wide open of a question. And what going to this idea of like asking these questions, it's very true that it's important to do it. And I want to emphasize the importance of following through with that particular question. So if you ask the question and your imagination says something, it's important to actually follow through with that. Because then if you don't, then you're telling yourself that I'm not willing to actually listen to you. I'm not willing to give the time and the space to really focus on you. So for example, like this morning, I asked myself a similar question. I asked my soul, like, in what way can I best express you today? Especially because I was going to have this call. And I had this image of this t-shirt that I'm wearing right now, which I can show very quickly. So it says, "Normal people scare me." And I was like, why do I feel like wearing this shirt? And it's partially because my soul right now is in this space where it is really questioning normality. And it's questioning how this idea of normality is actually killing the soul. It's actually destroying the imagination. The more that we try to be normal, the more that we move away from the uniqueness and the essence of our soul and our imagination. So to me, the idea of normality is actually pretty scary because it's telling me that our society is so comfortable with being devoid from the imagination. And that is really problematic, especially if we want to be truly powerful beings. I think we need to be really closely aligned with our imagination and our authenticity.
And in an infinite universe, why couldn't all of us have a complete, unique us? So we don't have to fit into any sort of stereotype or anything like that. I want to bring up something that you said inspired me to share from the practice of shamanism I do, the Paqo Kuna tradition approved. There's two sides of the mesa, and I'll throw up a picture of the mesas just so people can kind of see what that looks like. So the left, going down the left diagonal, the left side is the feminine side, and they call that the raw creative power of the universe. It's the unmanifested raw source energy. The right side is the form and structure, and the duty of all of us really is to walk that middle point to access that unlimited potential and wield it through our actions, through our intention, through our imaginations into the physicality that we're experiencing, manifesting the divine on the physical plane and doing it for ourselves and no one else. Doesn't mean we can't inspire each other or work together or collaborate, but you're doing it really for yourself. You don't need anything outside of you to complete you. You are complete, and you just get to have fun expressing that completed self into all the other aspects of divinity.
Yeah, I love that, and I love that you have that visual, because it's something that you can see regularly, and it reminds you of literally everything you just said. So you don't have to constantly think it, but you have a visual representation of it. I think when it comes to the imagination, there's a lot of times that we can create a visual representation of these like larger ideas, and the imagination or the soul more so will help to fill in the meaning of that. Like for me, for example, this whole idea, I'll be honest with you, I'm struggling with like even using the terminology of masculinity and femininity, and part of that's just because our society is really botched those concepts and the separation and all of that. So I struggle to use those terms specifically, but I find that there's a sort of dual way of expression that then comes together. And even me and like doing my nails, for example, like one is colored and one is not. And for me, this is an expression of somewhat of a paradox that's then coming together. And every time I see my hands, because I'm a martial artist, I use my hands very often. I see my hands, and it's a reminder of the way in which these two sides are coming together. So I just say that to mean that there's always these beautiful ways that we can visually represent these deeper concepts that we're constantly thinking about, or our soul is ruminating over.
And interesting, you'll love this if you don't like the breaking down of masculine and feminine. The Karo tradition, they believe everything is feminine. Everything is part of this field of loving energy called the Kausepacha, and everything is manifesting here. So by nature, everything is feminine. And then from there, we have this illusion of a separation of what we call masculine and feminine, but even that is all feminine. So it's kind of an interesting way that they look at it. And then the masculine side would be like the ovum of the universe, the galactic center, I don't really, it's called Tekse Muhuamaru in Quechua, but that would be like the masculine part of it. And that's holding the space for everything else to exist. So it's just kind of a fun way. I don't know. I felt like I wanted to share it with you. It might give a different point of view around things.
Yeah, I like that. I like that because it stretches the way that our culture thinks about masculinity and femininity. So I actually really appreciate you sharing that. And it sort of gives me this like really interesting image of the two sort of holding each other and containing each other. And it's not like one is inside the other, but it's more so the two are coming together in support of each other. Yeah.
Oh, and it goes into another thing, which I'm just now exploring, is this idea. It's called Yanatin, and it's like complementary duality would be a better translation of it. But it's where like one person, like what we're all feminine in this idea, but so it's the idea that what we call man and woman, like you would be able to find a Yanatin that would help teach the opposing part, like how they've mastered that. And then you work together kind of to harmonize those differences, complementary duality.
Yeah, that's interesting, because one of the things that I've been thinking about, and I haven't thought, I'm still formulating this whole concept around it, but one of the things that I've been thinking about in terms of gender is that we're sort of born into some expression of a gender that our society has created. And then our life experiences seem to be pulling us either away from that really static level of gender into some sort of fluid understanding of who we're meant to be. And so I sort of see it as like we're born with this like maybe dominant type of energy, and then life itself is meant to be the counter opposite, to pull us away from this dominant energy into something that's more fluid and can kind of go in between the two. Yeah. So
harmonizing of differences, or harmonizing of complementary duality is the exact verbiage that I've been reading. And I was reading that just this morning. I'm like, well, that really is standing out for some reason. And now I know it's because of this exact moment when we were going to be talking.
Oh, awesome. I'm so happy you brought it up. Ooh, it gives me chills.
Yeah. And a kind of a final reminder, everyone, if you have a question, if you have comments, if this has inspired something in you that you'd like to bring to our attention, you can make a comment. I see people watching, so I know like they're probably on their lunch break or something and they're just kind of listening. But if you do have a question, or if you want us to take the conversation in a particular direction, please let us know. And if you're listening on the replay or on the actual podcast, feel free to make a comment. And in a future stream, because I'm sure we will do this again, we can address your questions either in the comments or on a separate live stream, maybe when we get together to talk about magic.
Yes, I'm excited to talk with you about magic. Oh, so much to go there.
Oh yeah, it might be a part 1, 2, and 3. Who knows? Like we'll have to see how much we get into. But as we see if anybody makes a comment, any final inspirations or things coming from your imagination that you feel would be a contribution to the people watching now or in the future, or listening now or in the future?
So there's this tree that's actually right outside of my apartment. And I feel extremely envious of that tree. And the reason why I'm saying this is because I especially when it comes to my imagination and my soul and the way that I develop myself, I look to nature for inspiration. And I mean, we are an aspect of nature. No matter how much we try to devoid ourselves from that thought or destroy nature, we are nature as well. And so like there's this particular tree and I look at it, and the way that it stands is so, the word that always comes to mind is graceful. It just gracefully stands there, and there's this like line of like the electric cables that have been built, and the trees seem to have, it grew and it kind of wrapped itself around the cable as if it now owns the cable. And so this tree just stands there so elegantly and so beautifully and so gracefully. And so sometimes I sort of stare at that tree and like I sort of wish I was as elegant as the tree itself. And when I do that, it gives me ideas as to how to be more elegant, how to stand, how to move my hands, how to be more expressive in a way that's as elegant as I'm seeing within that particular tree. And so I guess I'm saying this as a advice to people who are trying to work with their imagination, who are trying to develop themselves. My advice is to find an element of nature that makes you feel envious, and see in what way you can become more like that. Like there's also this creek that's not too far from me, and the way the water flows with such precision, intention, and it just precision and intention. And every time I see that, it gets me to think, well, how can I be more precise? How can I have more intention in my own life? So I keep getting inspired by nature in that way. And we all have that capacity. So go outside, look at nature, and find ways that it inspires you to be more of yourself.
And that inspires me for a practice in shamanism that goes right into what you were offering there is, I'll use trees as the first example, that we have this exercise where you go find a mauki, which is tree, Paqo Kuna, trees, and you go up and put your navel right to it and you offer the tree your heaviness. And we look at this as a way to give our heaviness to the underworld. And our heaviness is light for the underworld, because it's not about right or wrong. It's about heavy and light based on where you're at. And our light, or our heaviness, is light for the underworld. As Elizabeth Jenkins would say, angel poop is light for us. Our poop is light for the underworld, right? So you offer the tree your heaviness. And the irony, the divine reciprocity, is that tree can teach you how it combines the elements to create something new. And so like if you find a stream and you want to learn its precision and its elegance, you offer it your hucha, you offer it your heaviness, and in response to that, it will gift you its wisdom and knowledge. You can do it with any aspect of nature. Do it for a mountain, a blade of grass, a flower. What contribution can you be to it? What contribution can it be to you? And enter this sense of aini, which means divine reciprocity, with whatever it is you're interacting with. And truly the target is to do that with all aspects of divinity. What contribution can you be to your fellow travelers? What contribution can they be to you? And therein lies the magic of going from the kingdom of me to the kingdom of we.
I love that. I love that so much. And it reminds me of, I remember I was in elementary school and I learned how plants work. And I learned that we give off carbon dioxide, which plants then absorb, and plants give out oxygen, which is what we breathe for the most part. And it was in that moment that I realized that the things that I think are waste are actually like medicinal or of benefit to something else. And so, as you were describing, you give off your heaviness. I find a lot of people, like, if you were to say that, they're like, well, why would I want to harm nature with my heaviness? But it's not that. It's this, there's something in the world that takes what you have to give, what you think might be bad or heavy or whatever, and it knows how to transmute that into its own medicine, and then it gives something back. So there is this beautiful reciprocity that happens. And that's one of the reasons why I love having Jerry, my non-binary plant here. Their name is Jerry. I love having Jerry there, because when I'm teaching, I feel like I'm giving wisdom to my students or whoever that's listening, but I'm also giving my carbon dioxide to Jerry, and Jerry's feeding me oxygen. So we're in this erotic exchange every single time I'm teaching. And so that makes me feel really excited and powerful.
Yeah, and I'm glad you mentioned teaching. Probably a really good thing to kind of wrap up with is for people to know, like, that they can connect with you because you do things remotely, and if they were interested in diving into martial arts, and not just, there's way more. It's not like what you see in the movies. It is like a thing that really helps you in all aspects of being. Do you want to talk a little bit about what you do, what you offer on your website?
Yeah, sure. So I have group classes. I have regular group classes. For the summer, I'm taking a break and I'm doing a lot of special events, but 90% of my work is online. So if you want to join a group class to kind of feel what it's like to work through some specific topic or some specific movements, I'm available. And I take in students. I do cap my classes to be fairly small, so no more than 20, because I like to really be able to sense everyone that's there. And right now, my maximum is 23. So I have group classes that people are welcome to join. I have special events also that people are welcome to join. And if people want to work with me individually, I have, it's not like a traditional type of coaching program. It's more so there are different forms that I teach that are related to a certain type of development. So on the psychological end, there's forms for authenticity, for trauma, for anxiety, for grief. And then what I do is I work with you through the form. I teach you the form, and we talk about what comes up, and you sort of work through it. Like right now, I have a couple students that I'm teaching the grief form to, because they're going through tremendous amount of grief. And it's been really helpful for them to process the grief, but then also have literally a tool, like a slow movement meditation tool, to help them work through these issues of grief that they have. So I have psychological forms, and I have spiritual development forms. And those are like people who want to do astral travel, people who want to work on intuition, ancestral healing, past life regression. I have forms specific for that. And it's sort of the same concept of I'm teaching you the forms, and you're practicing and you're developing the skills. And then the whole point is, I don't want to become a crutch for your own development. I want to give you the tools so you can continue to flourish on your own. So by the end of working with me and learning these forms, you have the forms, you can do them on your own. So then you can continue to work and develop without needing me. Because to be honest with you, my goal is to work with people to the point where they no longer need me.
Yep, that's my target as well. Some people only see me once a year. Other people, when they first come, I might see them more frequently, and then it kind of gets spaced out. And then there's some people that just love sessions, so they just come for a session because they love it. And I'm like, that's cool. As long as you don't need me, that's cool. But we want to empower people to be empowered to be able to be their own greatest resource, because that's truly everybody is the greatest resource for themselves. We just have been taught not to trust it. And and that's what you and I really do, is we empower people. I loved it. Let me read the exact thing, how I was supposed to introduce you. Then I totally didn't read it. But here is Sifu Love, the founder of Healing Kung Fu, a queer-friendly spiritual material art school that teaches people how to heal themselves so that they can feel empowered to live their authentic self. And my company's slogan is to help people to perceive, know, be, receive, and express their unique voice in this world. So we're so on the same page that it's just wonderful to have this dance conversation with you. And I wonder what else is possible in future collaborations.
Oh, yes, for sure. This has been great. And just as you said, I think you said the word dance. This felt like a dance within our conversation. And to imagine, like, what is a conversation like that's a dance between two people. Like, I feel like we just tangoed, and it was beautiful. So thank you.
Yep, you're a wonderful dancer, sir. But
I train hard.
But thank you everyone for tuning in today. If you're watching on the replay, if you have questions, please comment, and we will plan for sure another topic. Sounds like it's going to be around magic, but until then, we'll see you next time. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining us today for the show. The Sonic Shaman is part of the Emergence of Being Contributor Network. Visit emergenceofbeing.com to learn about all the contributors and learn about our services and upcoming events. Please take a moment to subscribe to the channel. You can contribute to the show by supporting our efforts and sharing our content with those you care about and those who need it most.